Bob McLeod.
Thank you very much. Craig, can you hear in the back?
I can hear you.
All right. Raise your hands if you know what an inker does, or think you know what an inker does. You guys are the 1%. Most people really don't know what an inker does. I really think a lot of editors don't even know what an inker does. I mean, they know that they cover the pencils with ink, but there's so much more to it than that. If you know anything about inking, it gets pretty complicated. So I'm very honored to be asked to speak at the Inkwell Awards today. I've always considered inking to be an art form, and I'm very proud to be known as an inker, and hopefully to be considered a good inker. Inking's been very good to me, and there are many ink jobs that I'm very proud of. But although most people know me mainly as an inker, and I've certainly done an awful lot of inking, I've never really considered myself primarily an inker. My first work in comics was penciling and inking movie satires for Marvel's Crazy magazine. I was always much more of a Mad magazine fan than a comic book fan, and my major influence was Mort Drucker's work for Mad. I wasn't even aware of his early comic book work in DC Comics until way after I started working in comics. But drawing a few pages for Crazy each month wasn't really full-time work. And being around all the other comic book artists when I was working in Neil Adams Continuity Studios made me kind of irritated that Marvel and DC wouldn't give me any penciling work drawing dramatic comics. They rightly said my figures were too stiff, and I didn't know much about visual storytelling. Because I'd never really given it much thought, I always preferred drawing funny stuff. But I made up my mind to prove to everyone that I could draw superheroes, and I started studying, penciling intensely. I mean, round the clock, I was studying a lot. However, my world changed when Mike Esposito suggested I could learn inking much more quickly than penciling. And he let me ink some backgrounds for him over George Tusco and Iron Man. I constantly practiced getting control of the pen and the brush, and sure enough, a few weeks later, I was getting regular work as an inker. Now, this was back in the 70s, and they were looking for warm bodies, basically, to do all the pages, because they were expanding and adding books to their titles, and they almost doubled the number of books they were publishing, and they needed people to do all that artwork. So I was lucky enough to learn on the job, which unfortunately we can't do anymore today. But I also kept working for Crazy, penciling and inking the Teen Hulk strip, and a couple years later I finally started getting some superhero penciling work. People often ask me if I prefer penciling or inking, and I prefer to do both. But rarely I had time to do both, and I was constantly being offered inking jobs. I penciled off and on all through my career, but I did more inking than penciling because I was faster at it. I could make more money at it because I was faster, and because I didn't like other inkers on my pencils. If I couldn't ink my own pencils, rather than have somebody else ink my pencils, I'd rather be inking somebody else's pencils. So inking another artist is very different from inking your own pencils, however, because they do things you'd never think of in your own work, and either because you just don't know how to think like they do, or simply because you don't know how to do what they do. So I've been lucky enough to ink dozens of other inkers from many generations with a great variety of styles. Everything from John Buscema's kind of connect-the-dots breakdowns, to Tom Rainey's super tight pencils, from Gene Colan's kind of many shades of gray pencils, to Mike Golden's complex line drawings. And each artist demands different knowledge and skills from the inker. It's practically impossible to ink those four artists I just mentioned using the same techniques and methods if you hope to do them justice. I love inking, but to me good inking depends entirely on good drawing. And if the penciler doesn't supply it, which is often the case, then the inker needs to. Following bad drawing causes bad inking. Inkers who don't know how to draw are at the mercy of a weak penciler. And they often misinterpret what a good penciler is trying to do, which is just one of the reasons why inking is not tracing. Inking is an art, knowing where to put thick and thin lines, where to put rendering, where not to, what kind of rendering to put where, how to vary technique to render different textures like trees, ground rubble, water, skin, clothing, where to add blacks and lighting, It's a very complex business, far removed from simple tracing. There is some tracing involved in inking, of course, and on type pencils, there can be a lot of it. But all you have to do is look at any artist inked by two different inkers to see what a difference an inker can make. Even over type pencils, the inker always makes changes for better and sometimes for worse. A gray pencil line and a black ink line are just two very different things. And when a penciler and editor are wise enough to allow the inker some room to really contribute some creativity of his own, real magic can happen. Magic like Jack Kirby and Joe Sinnott, Gene Colan and Tom Palmer, Neil Adams and Dick Giordano, Frank Miller, Klaus Janson, and John Byrne and Terry Olston. Imagine the magic we would have missed if Jack Kirby and Gene Colan had always just done their own inking. So people need to give inkers, value inkers so much more than they do, and give us our due. The Inkwell Awards are here to do just that, and it's high time. So thanks to Bob Allman and everyone else who helped organize these awards, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you so very much for doing this for us, Bob. I appreciate that. I want to take a quick moment to give special recognition of three brilliant people. First and foremost, Joe Sinnott. He's been our Hall of Fame namesake, and it's in our first recipient of it since 2008. But he's been to many our unofficial frontline ambassador by default. We want to honor him with what he deserves for what he's done to bring us attention, credibility, and esteem, and to be the nicest guy in the world while doing so. I'd like to retroactively, proudly, and officially offer him the title of Special Ambassador. We've all been trying to get Joe here for some time, but no such luck to date, so maybe next time. This unique silver Inkwell trophy will promptly be shipped to his studio in New York. Basically. This is Joe Sinnott, Special Ambassador, Inkwell Award since 2008. Two other retired committee members, Nathan Mazenville and Daniel Best, although Danny actually dropped down to contributor status, so he's still around. But I wanted to thank them for their outstanding time served. I will post a blog entry on them at the Inkwell Awards website within a week for those interested in reading about them and their valuable contributions. And now, without further ado, I present our distinguished presenter, Inking is Sexy ink artist and hero of the day, filling in for the missing Ethan Van Sciver with my apologies, Mark Gehring.